thing. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I'm assuming that the recording is okay now. Yeah. All right. Continue. So 6 things to assess in as a judge. So you have to judge the logical burden. So you have to elaborate the likelihood and the impact of the team's claim. So you need to really see the logical burden of a certain team. Why is their argument true? What are the factors that could supplement their claims to be more solid? What are the impacts and why are they likely to happen? So you really need to understand the burden of the teams that a judge should know. Secondly, motion-based burden. So you have to see the key issues that are addressed and asked by the motion. So you need to really see the relevance coming from the debaters. Furthermore, the comparison and also the framing. You need to see why is one argument from one team better than the others, or why certain idea is more important than the others. So that's the way you assess on that one. Okay, next one. So in assessing burden, that's the first one. There is no automatic win and no automatic loss. A point's quality increases with higher relevance with the motion. For example, in actor motion, you really need to see the specific interests of the actors. Just like what I told you earlier, the team that can fight the best interest of a specific actor, they win. Secondly, in policy motion, the team that can execute the best policy, they win. Third of all, in analysis motion, judging whether something is good or bad, the team that can give a better and deeper analysis on why something is good or why something is bad, they win. In regret motion and in prefer motion, the team that can provide the better world, either alternative history or alternate reality, they win. So that's the way you judge a certain debate. In actor motion, see which team that can give the best interest. In policy motion, which team that can give the best policy. In analysis motion, which one that can give a deeper analysis and deeper reasoning on why something is good or bad, they win. In regrets or prefer motion, putting it simple, which one provides a better world, they win. So that's the way you really assess a debate as a judge. As a judge, you have to also understand the keywords of each motion. For example, this house opposes the hustle culture in the workplace. As a judge, even though you are expecting the debaters to explain how does the hustle culture work, you have to also have a certain knowledge on how does hustle culture works. That's the reason why, as a judge, you have to be a globally informed citizen or an average reasonable voters. You are not just like a dumb blonde judging a certain round. What you need to do is that at the very least, you are equipping yourselves with a decent knowledge that is able to propel you from judging the debate correctly. Or for example, this house would rather prioritize investing in armament industry than agriculture. As a judge, you need to understand how does agriculture sector work and how does armament industry work. So that's the example that you can use for assessing burden. So that's the first thing that you can assess as a judge. That is the burden. Next one, on the content. So as a judge, the question that you should ask is this one. Did the speaker explain the points well? Was the logical process explained? Was the significance explained well? Or was it just an assertion? Was an actor characterized properly? Were there examples to support the points? So as a judge, you need to really assess first the logical process or the mechanization. Second of all, the significance. Third of all, the characterization. Number 4, the sense of urgency. Number 5, the metric or the tipping point on why this idea matters a lot. That's when framing matters, for example. So the quality of the content is something that you need to assess. The keywords to decide whether or not certain contents are qualified are all of those things that are mentioned in this slide. Logical process, significance, attempt of explanation, characterization of a certain actors, and supporting facts or supporting examples to propel the ideas. Remember, airtime is not the quality. What does it mean? It means that just because a speaker spent like 3 or 4 minutes to one idea, if that idea does not fulfill every single thing that I mentioned earlier, the logical process, the significance, the characterization, the quality is still a boo. All right. The more you explain a point is explained, the more effort is that is needed to respond. What does it mean? It means that there are certain speakers that usually put 3 layers of arguments, right? It means as a speaker, as the opponent, you have to also put the same level of effort in responding this idea. That means either you give layered responses or you give multiple attempts in responding the multiple layered arguments coming from the opponents. The biggest mistake that opponent usually makes is that they only provide a simplistic response towards the multi-layered argument that has been brought by the opponent. And that's the downfall of your opponent, because your opponent has provided the rebuttals, but it's still not enough to kill the arguments of your team. And just like what Kelly Clarkson said, right? What doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, it makes you win, because the rebuttals does not kill your argument, it strengthens your team, it strengthens the tipping point, it strengthens the more reasons for you to win the debate. So yeah, as a judge, compare. That's the most important thing. All right, next. So the third thing that you need to assess is framings. When teams try to frame debate, you have to impose the same logical burden. Like, why is that framing important? Did they manage to explain why that framing beats their opponent? Was there any logical explanation to support such framing? So do not hesitate to give credits to teams or speakers who managed to help you in understanding the key metrics used in the debate. Because debate right now has been evolving. It's not about which team that provides a better explanation anymore, but which team that can persuade you on pointing out which one is more important than the others. So making sure you understand the evolution of debate right now. And as a judge, yeah, you have to really adapt well on this kind of evolving standards of judging. Right, next one. Assessing rebuttal. So in assessing rebuttal, you have to keep track of the responses and the specific points being responded to. Engagement can do a lot of things. Either the engagement is nothing at all, it means that the response is, yeah, good attempt, but yeah, it's not attacking the ideas at all. Or yeah, it only sheds a certain doubt of the arguments, but it does not entirely kill the argument. Or yeah, it mitigates the argument, but there are some minor things that stands in that argument, or it completely destroys the argument. So you have to really assess the rebuttals and the quality or the strength of that rebuttals. Once again, teams should not be penalized for not responding to an argument. But remember, by not penalizing doesn't mean that it gives them an easy way to win. They also might lose simply because the arguments of the opponent stands. Diagonal engagement also matters, so you have to assess POIs as well. What does it mean by diagonal engagement? Diagonal engagement happens in BP debating because opening team can only engage to closing in POI. Same goes to closing team can only engage to opening teams through their responses and also POI. So that's the way you assess rebuttals. So that's for number 4. Now, number 5, extension. So the way you assess the extension is, first of all, you cannot simply discount a certain extension simply because it's not original. Let's jump to number 2. Originality is not a metric. That means as a closing team, they may operate under the principles of their opening. So do not quickly judge the closing teams as derivative. So this is the huge downfall of certain judge. Certain judge find it easy to say that the arguments are derivative. All right, so the way you compare between the opening and also the closing is 2 things. Number 1, which one is more well explained? Number 2, which one is framed to be more crucial? And the responses, you have to also see the relevance of the responses and which responses manage to disprove a point. So that's the way you really assess the extensions coming from the closing teams or the deputy speakers of 3-on-3 debate. Next one, assessing whips. So if they bring out new arguments that no one can respond, just discount that idea because it's totally unfair for the judge and also for the whip. They may add new examples, they may add new characterization, and also impact and such. So as long as they still fall under the same conclusion and premise brought by the member, that means that's a good attempt for them to strengthen the idea. New rebuttal is permitted, but be careful. Some whip speakers right now, including me, used a new strategy of like a subtle addition of their ideas in a form of rebuttal. And yeah, sometimes I can get away with it. Sometimes certain judges say that, yeah, it's too late. I knew that you are putting new arguments in that responses. So as a judge, you have to be really sensitive just to make sure that the whip does not get away from putting new ideas in their rebuttals. So if they bring new materials, do not penalize them, do not deduct their score, but just pretend that they never said anything about that new matter. Just pretend that that new matter does not exist in the debate earlier. So that's the way you assess whips in judging. So that's how you put the 6 layers of assessment. Now, next point. Now, the common mistakes. So first of all, in assessing points, there are usually 4 mistakes that a judge makes. First of all, valuing the argument based on its presence as opposed to its quality. Certain judges put too much credit on one-liner ideas, for example, or not assessing the rebuttals the way they assess the arguments, or points that are left out are automatically discounted. Sometimes points that are left out, it might be because the opponents do not understand how to respond to that strong arguments, but some judges simply discount that idea because of them being left out. Valuing responses based on its presence is also a wrong one. If you see that there is already a response, but the response are not enough, that means you have to discount that responses, not count that as, oh yeah, the opponent has an attempt in responding, they win. And yeah, that's going to be a very huge mistake for you. Next one, assessing burdens. 4 things as well. You cannot be unfair and you cannot be unequal in imposing burdens of both affirmative team and also the negative team. Second of all is this. If you do not define the judging metric, for example, like likelihood, impact, and etc., it might be very confusing for the debaters on which metric or which parameter or which tipping point that you decide to give the winning or losing to a certain team. And furthermore, you cannot give the losing teams a reason of them not being comparative without explaining it more. If you want to say the losing teams are not being comparative, you need to be really explicit and really detailed in explaining which one that they are failing in their comparative attempt. Furthermore, you omit the burden of responding from the closing teams. That's also a common mistake that a judge usually makes. Next one, contradiction. So the way you assess contradiction, the common mistake is that certain judges treat contradiction as a bigger sin that leads to a losing to a certain team. That is not okay. 4 things that you need to do. First, if it is not pointed out, just pretend that the contradiction does not exist at all. Furthermore, you cannot also treat that contradiction as something really harmful to the entire case. If it is pointed out, you credit the speaker who managed to explain why it is harmful. And if it is only pointed out and not explained, it should not be credited as much. So that's the way you assess contradiction. Now, jumping to number 5, stepping in. You cannot do that. So most of the times, judge are stepping in, and that's really hurting the reputation of that judge. So when you put in specific expertise or specific knowledge in your assessment, you put your own set of responses beyond the basic logical inquiries, you have certain expectations that the debaters should bring, but because the debaters did not do that, you discount them, you give them losses, or you conform to your preferential biases, just like what I told you earlier. For example, you have certain biases towards racial minorities or certain gender minorities or certain religion or certain political leaning. That's totally not fine. Or not taking notes at all. This is the huge sin of all time. Or filling in the gaps of debater, like completing the arguments for them because you think you know where they are going. That's stepping in. That's a huge sin. Avoid that one. Next one, others. So this one. So you cannot simply give the loss to a certain team simply because they are not signposting, simply because they are overtime. That is totally not okay. Or you judge based on reputation bias, or we know it as halo effect. What does it mean? It means that when you're judging a power teams versus dark horse teams or underrepresented underrepresented institution, you automatically give the winning towards the powerhouse teams, despite the valiant effort coming from underrepresented institutions or dark horse teams. So make sure you have to always be equal. You have to always be a clean slate judge, making sure that despite the reputations, despite the past remnants of a certain teams, please push that aside just to make sure that you have to be really fair in judging the debate. Furthermore, on this one, you cannot allocate more time to justify when a reputable team loses. If they lose, period. All right. So you have to be really fair on this point. So that's the 6 things that you can assess. Last of all, POIs. Teams are highly encouraged to take POIs, right? Not taking POIs or dismissing a POI may affect the final call, especially in close calls. Chairs need to remind the rooms in case speakers don't engage in POIs. What does it mean? It means that if a certain team deliberately rejects POIs, we can consider that as a failure of that team not to be able to engage to the opponent. So we might give the loss for that team simply because they cannot engage to the opponent teams. So you have to be really sensitive in this POI matter, especially in VP debating. So that's how you assess the POI. Before we go on scoring the debate, if you have any question, I'll give the time later on, okay? So now scoring the debate. Let's talk about the scoring range in 3-on-3 debate. So the newest format of scoring 3-on-3 debate is based on Nepal Austral 2021. So the range is 70 until 80, and the reply speeches has the range of 35 until 40. You may use decimals in the reply speeches, and decimals are not allowed in the substantive speeches. This is the downfall as well. You have to keep in mind that reply speeches are separate from substantive speeches. Do not score a reply speech by merely dividing the score of a speaker's substantive speech in half. What does it mean? It means that if I get 78 in my speech, it does not mean that my reply speech will automatically be 39. My reply speech might be worse than my substantive speech. And if you feel like my reply speech was equal to 75 speech, that means you can give my reply speech 37.5, not automatic 39, for example. So that's the way you assess reply speech. Next one. So this is the speech scoring criteria from 70 until 75. 75 is the average one. 70 is the below average one. Yeah. So for 70, we're giving 70 to speakers that has almost never relevant content. The speech is very confusing. It's very confused. There's no structure or fulfillment of that role in any meaningful sense is provided or did not speak at all. For 71 until 72, the speaker rarely makes a relevant claim. And all right, there is a certain ideas, but the ideas were very shallow. The ideas were not backed up with a good analysis. And furthermore, the speech is very, very, very difficult to follow because there is no structure, no direction, and no conclusion at all. You can give certain speakers 73 until 74 when the relevant arguments are there with some explanations, but then again, the structure is still poor. The attempt to fulfill the role is still poor because there are still many missing links like likelihoods, mechanization, or significance behind that ideas, or what else, aftermath, and etc. Now, a speaker can get 75 if their arguments are generally relevant. The speech was a little bit difficult to follow, but the ideas were there, but still there is a certain logical gap in that idea, and there is a simplistic argumentation in that idea. So that's the way you give them an average one. So an average speaker means that, okay, he or she or they have fulfilled their burden of proof, but you are still not that high enough. So you can give them that average score. Now, for 76 until 77, you can see the table here. So we give 76 to 77 to speakers that are good to very good. The speech contains relevant arguments and contribution which address key issues in the round, speaker is able to provide sufficient and thoughtful explanation. The speech is largely clear and speaker fulfilled their role. So that's for 76 until 77. For speaker that has 78 is the speaker that give a sophisticated arguments. The links are very well explained. The responses are very layered. The speech is very clear from one argument to another. It's very coherent. For 79 until 80, that's likely one of the best speeches given at Australs. You believe that the responses are very comprehensive. The manner is very compelling. It's really hard to see the rebuttals or the refutation towards the opponent. So that's the substantive speech scoring criteria in the 3-on-3 debate. Before we move on to the reply speech scoring criteria, I'm going to answer one question from Tasha. So what will you do if you are the judge in the debate that are considered as a deadlock debate? For example, it happens in both sides and contradictions debate. So how to give a good oral adjudication that can satisfy debaters? All right. If there is a deadlock, so usually deadlock exists, right? Because the debate might not be engaging, or the engagement might be very well. But then again, it's kind of hard to find which team that should win. So that's the reason why I told you guys earlier, you have to be really holistic. If there are certain deadlocks in one or two issues, find another issues that may resolve that deadlock. Find another tipping point as the tiebreaker. Because if you force the deadlock and force the winning to a certain team, it might be a little bit unfair, considering that you are forcing your judgment or forcing your call to a certain debate. So in order to solve deadlock, tiebreaker needs to be taken. To give a good oral adjudication that can satisfy the debaters, I'll get back to you later, because I have prepared tips on giving like a satisfying oral adjudication. All right, for the reply speech scoring criteria, from 35 until 40, you can directly read the table on this point. So later on, okay, I'll just skip this part, because this material will be shared to you guys. I'll give it to the operator, and also I'll give it to the committee. So later on, you can check this out. And if you have any questions in regards to reply speech scoring criteria, feel free to do so. All right. So so we will move on. So margin in 3-on-3 debate. So margin here means that the reflection of how close or how clear the debate was. 1 until 2 is a very close debate with minor differences separating the teams. 3 or 4 is a close to clear debate. 5 until 9 is a relatively clear decision with one team having the obvious advantage over its opponent. 10 plus is a very clear win for a team, right? So this is the margin in 3-on-3 debate. Now for scoring in BP, this is also the same. It's 50 until 100. You can directly read the description in the table. I'll basically skip this part and I'll just explain the average part. All right, let's go to the average part here. 73 until 75. So this is the average one. So arguments are almost exclusively relevant. It may fail to address one or more core issues sufficiently. The arguments are logical, but still, it's very simplistic and it's very vulnerable to responses. It is clear enough, but still it's very easy to be responded. So when you realize that it's easy for us to respond this idea, that means the speaker might get 73 until 75. So I'll also skip this part because I'll share this material later on. If you still have any more questions in regards to scoring in BP, feel free to ask me after this webinar. All right, so now, okay, we're going to talk about scoring the fellow judges, panels, or trainees. So in a certain competition, sometimes you are required to score your judges, be it the panels or the trainees. So these are the rubrics that you can read. For example, you can give 1 until 4 to judges that have poor tracking of the debate. The judge dismissed the key or the significant chunks of the explanation. There is an unfair comparison between the teams, and there is a major difficulties in articulating their thoughts systematically. So You can give them 1 until 4 if the adjudicators fulfill this criteria. You can give them 5 until 7 if they have acceptable tracking quality. That's the first one. If their comparisons are rather simple, they may miss some key burden evaluation, but when made are rather fair. Comments are occasionally helpful, somewhat cooperative during the conferral, and also, they articulate properly at simple point, but in tight explanation, sometimes these judges find it hard to explain why a certain team wins or certain team loses. 8 to 10 scores are given to adjudicators that can track debate well and have a really strong grasp on the debate's nooks and crannies. They can provide justified comparisons that goes into really a detailed manner when it is necessary. They provide a helpful or collaborative contributions to solidify their decision and manages the conferral well. They articulate multiple comparisons with very, very great clarity and also detail. So that's how you score judges. Just read this criteria and reflect that to the performances of the judge that you are assessing. For example, if you become a chair judge in a certain competition. Right, moving on. Now let's talk about oral adjudication. This will directly answer the question of Tasha about how to give like a satisfying oral adjudication. So we're going to talk about the preparation and the delivery. In BP, before the oral adjudication, there is a conferral process and there is a reaching a consensus process. What is a conferral? Conferral here is an exchange of thoughts. So in BP, you have to reach consensus or you have to reach one vote that is the same for everyone. So in conferral process, you have to listen to what the others have to say. Just because there are panels and trainees, it doesn't mean they don't have meaningful things to say. This is very important so that you can have more perspectives to come, just to make sure that your OA will be much more holistic in this one. So when chairs disagree, do not make statements, but they say blah, 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 so the point does not stand. But just make a question. How do you value this in comparison to that, and etc.? This will value the panelists or trainees to engage more. So in this one, you have to be really open to receive certain thoughts. Being open allows you to have more perspectives, and that more perspectives will solidify or complete your OA a little bit more. And that's going to be very, very important. Panels and trainees should also be assessed by how helpful they are during the discussion. But being helpful doesn't mean being submissive, just like what I told you earlier. If you want to be helpful, you have to say what you want to say in the conferral process. By being submissive, you might be considered as not contributive. So that's the reason why you have to reach a certain consensus during the preparation of that OA, just to make sure that once the consensus is reached, that's when your OA will be much more holistic, considering that you have discussed many things in many aspects. All right, next one. So sometimes if consensus is not reached, voting is taken. So a stubborn judge with no reasoning whatsoever can be considered as a bad judge. You are considered to be as open-minded as possible. Like, for example, oh, I missed that. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm happy to change my decision. So when you are changing your decision, it does not make you a bad judge. I can be considered as one of the judges that switched my decision very, very easily. And that does not make me a bad judge. So if it comes to voting, you have to justify your split. Do not just do so because you think it's cool. Voting should be a last resort if consensus is impossible to be reached. Voting should be done between two teams to determine which one is higher. In the case of two voting judges being present, the chair has 2 vote counts as a tiebreaker. So that's for the voting process. Now for oral adjudication, theory, you have 10 minutes to deliver your OA. You have to announce the ranks in BP or the winning teams in 3-on-3 debate immediately. You cannot waste too much time on general comments and etc. Clearly make comparison between the teams. Do not just repeat what they say, and but clearly elaborate why the fourth ranking team is below the other three, for example, or the third ranking team is below the top two teams, or why affirmative is losing against the negative, or why negative is losing against the affirmative. So you have to also avoid giving a constructive feedback during the OA, just to make sure that the debaters do not consider that as a stepping in process. Remember that what you deliver will be evaluated by the debaters as well to determine your final score and your breaking status as a judge. Now, this is the tips that might answer Tashia's question earlier about having a satisfying OA. So basically, there are two ways that you have to do before the OA and also during the OA. Before the OA, in note-taking, this is just the same as you prepare your speech for the judges. Numbering your OA is a must. What does it mean? It means that if you want to keep the debaters focused in your OA, you have to make it very structured. That's exactly why people can listen to a storytelling or watch movies until the end, because the presentation of the plot was very neat from the beginning until the end, right? If they can also do the same thing in your OA if you put that effort for the clarity. So numbering your OA is a must. Providing explicit or clear metric or tipping point for your guidance is also a must, just to make sure that that the debaters do not have any confusion and they are really directed well by your structured OA. So that's before the OA. During the OA, based on my experience, first, you have to show commitment while delivering the OA. What does it mean? Clarity is a must. Fluency is a must. Yeah, it's sad because you might think that, I might not have like a good manner in explaining my OA in OA. That's a huge challenge that you need to overcome, because as a judge, you are convincing both teams on why one team loses and one team wins. That convincing thing can only happen if you are having that confidence or having like a good manner in making sure, in compelling them to finally accept their decision. So you have to show the commitment while delivering the OA. The debaters would most likely engage to the level of commitment that you put, which may lead them in giving you high scores as a fair reward for your commitment. So the way you deliver it, you might deliver it enthusiastically, just like how debaters usually deliver their speech to the judges. Furthermore, you have to also give hamburger criticism: constructive, destructive, constructive. What does it mean? It means that this is my personal experience. Usually for the losing teams, I'm going to applaud potential points or applaud promising points that have been brought by them. That's the constructive part. But after that, I'm going to the destructive part, in which I'm going to say, but however, the reason why this potential or promising point did not fly was because of, and then I explain the metric or the tipping point that result to their loss or such. And then I'm going back to the constructive. If you can explain this one, probably you can win the debate earlier. So that's the hamburger criticism that I'm usually using, that I believe gives the closure and gives the relief for the losing teams and gives them the realization that, oh, I could have won that if I did what I said in the Kachia said in the OA earlier. So hamburger criticism might be one of the ways that you can use in your OA, because most of the time this is the pitfalls that are done by judges right now. In the losing teams, they are directly saying, this is your mistake, A, B, C, D, E. That's why you lose. For the winning teams, you have done A, B, C, D. We praise you for that. You win. So this is very, 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 very dangerous, because the losing teams will feel very, very discouraged, will feel very, very underappreciated. And the sad fact is that when they are feeling underappreciated, when they are feeling discouraged, what will happen is that, this judge is putting like a sheer favoritism for the winning team. Let's give them 5. Let's give them 6. Let's give them at best 7, despite the fact the quality of your OA might deserve 8 scores, 9 scores, or even 10 scores. Believe me, guys, I've been there, and yeah, it's not good to get scores that are lower than what I expected. So yeah, probably you have to be able to pander to the emotional instability of the debater, and that's why hamburger criticism is one of the ways for me to diffuse that kind of discouragement, diffuse that kind of disappointment, or diffuse that kind of anger or resentment that the debaters might have towards me as a judge. Furthermore, in assessing with metric, direct clarity is a must. So not only that you have to provide explicit tipping point or metric for your guidance, but in delivering it, your clarity needs to be ensured. That's when your manner of explanation needs to be taken on that point. So that's the personal tips that I can give for the oral adjudication. Does that answer your question, Tasya?
Yes, thank you, Pak.
Okay, right. So I think, yeah, that's all that I can explain about how to be a good judge. So basically, being a good judge, it requires like lots of airtime as well. What does it mean? It means that you have to also throw into yourself in the world of debating first, just to make sure that you understand like team rules, motion types, and everything. And that's going to be very important for you because your experience of debating might trigger your instinct as a judge. Because being a judge without the right instinct, it might be very hard for you to survive in the judging world. So that's the reason why by being a judge means that the engagement through the debating needs to also be taken or needs to be also ensured, because by being a judge without that good instinct, it's going to be very hard for you to survive on that point. Any questions from this point?
All right, guys, if you have any question, you can raise your hand and unmute yourself, or you can write those questions on the chat box. Okay, it seems that we have a question. Hello, Ka, I want to ask on how to train ideally to be a better judge.
All right.
Jefta.
Okay. Hi, Jefta. So the question was how to train ideally to be a better judge. Number one, you have to throw in yourself in judging training just to judge a debate sparring, for example. Ask your senior to assess your judging. Is the metric enough, or is the delivery of your OA enough, for example, or is your fairness being applied in judging the debate? So usually the ideal training that I would use is that you can judge a debate sparring. That's the first one. But if you find it hard to judge a debate sparring, I think, yeah, in YouTube videos, there are practically lots of videos that you can access right now. It's very widely accessible. So you can directly watch the debate and judge the debate on your own and try to make the oral adjudication on your own. Or the ideal training would be throwing into yourself as an independent judge for a competition. So there are plenty of ways for Jefta to be a better judge. But one thing that I have to say, being a better judge is like being a better singer, because as a singer, you have to consistently hone your skill, right? You have to consistently hit the right notes. If not, you might be inexperienced to hit that note. Just like judging, you have to constantly put a consistent display of experiences just to make sure that you can gain the growth in debate judging. So hopefully that answers the question. Yeah. All right. Okay, you're welcome, Jefta. Any other question?
Okay, I will wait around 2 minutes if you guys still have any other question. If not, then I guess we can move on to the photo session. So I will wait until until 20 past 10. Okay.
Ada.
Okay, so we have a question from Giovanni Dimas. Hi, Ka, I want to ask, what's the first step after the debate to construct OA? Where to start the comparison?
All right. Thank you so much, Dimas, for the question. So what is the first step after the debate to construct OA is that you have to find the clashing points, like which one is clashing. For example, if you find that the debate was discussing about one issue that is clashing, for example, the issue of parents or the issue of government, for example. So there are two clashes there, talking about the parents and talking about the government. After that, the way you start the comparison is to see the metric. For example, in the issues of parents, the reason why affirmative wins, three metrics, for example. Number one, they have a better sense of urgency. Number two, they have a deeper characterization of parents. The last one, for example, they have like more engagement to the worst and the best case scenarios. That's the three metrics why they win, for example. In terms of government, for example, the reason why the affirmative team wins, there's only one metric, because they are able to neutralize that this is the that this is not the only policy that the government should take, for example. And unfortunately, the response coming from the negative team is not enough to debunk the attempt coming from the affirmative that has drawn that the solution coming from the negative is not exclusive, for example, like that. So the way you start the comparison is to see which issues that are clashing or which issues that are contested in the debate. And after that, when you have found one, two, or three issues or three clashes that are happening in the debate, see the tipping points, reread your note, recheck your note, and once you find the upper hand reasons or the reasons why a certain team wins, it's going to be very easy for you to prepare and construct your OA. Yeah, hopefully that answers. Yeah. Okay. All right. You're welcome, Dimas. Any other question?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, there's one more question, and I think this will be the last
Oh.
question. Okay. Hello, Ka, I want to ask, is there any difference in judging debate with a prepared motion and the impromptu one?
Definitely there is a difference. The difference is this. Judging an impromptu debate is way more easier rather than the prepared motion. Why? Because judging a prepared motion, usually if you are judging teams that are highly performing, most of the time they're going to bring ideas that are very, very sophisticated that leads you to be having difficulties in seeing the flaws of the arguments or seeing the flaws of the ideas, especially when they are bringing like too many examples or too many case studies that lead you to have like a certain doubt in deciding which one team loses or which one team wins. If it is an impromptu debate, it's a fair game for everyone. It means that all teams are only given 30 minutes for the preparation time, right? And debaters, no matter how good they're still humans. So most of the times they're still having that limitation. And that limitation gives us the ease or the easier way for us to find out which one is lacking and which one is still something that needs to be worked on and such. So for me personally, it's more easier. It's way easier judging an impromptu debate. Yeah. So that's the answer from me, Dila.
All right. Thank you for the answer, Katsuya, and thank you for the question, Dila. Due to the limit time, I think that we need to end our session today. And thank you, Katsuya, for having to be our speaker for today's session. Tasha is annoying. Okay. And yeah, before we end the session, I would like to invite everyone to open their camera so that we can do a photo session. Yeah, Tasha. Ini.
Okay, guys. So you can open your cam. I'm so sorry, my camera isn't working. So yeah, okay. So okay. So we'll start the photo session from 1, 2, 3, cheese. One more. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you, Kak Chia.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Kak Chia. Okay, to close our Sanata Dharma beginners class, there will be a closing speech from Natasha Mariana as the president of EDS. So I will give the time and screen to Natasha Mariana.
Hi guys, so as the president and the representative of EDS Sanata Dharma, thank you for joining us until today, and I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the amazing speakers that has helped EDS Sanata Dharma dreams to help Indonesia to better reformation. So thank you for Kak Chia, Kak Astri, and Kak Kushai, and also Jen for helping EDS Sanata Dharma. And also, I hope you guys enjoy our webinars and see you soon in our next big event, Sanata Dharma Debate Open Competition on 19 until 20 March 2022. So thank you so much, and I hope you guys enjoy and learn this webinar as much as we do. So thank you all.
All right, thank you, Natasha Mariana. Speaking of Sanata Dharma Debate Open, I would like to promote our debate competition. So, operator, can you please share the screen so that everyone can see? Okay, all right. So, Sanata Dharma Open will be held online for 2 days using virtual parliamentary format with 40 team cap, including novice category. It will be held on the 19th of March until the 20th of March 2022. The registration timeline is from 15 January until 5 February with the price of 300,000 for early bird and 325,000 rupiah for regular. We also have independent adjudicator for the price of 75,000 rupiah. And for the adjudicator core, we have Ahmad Kushai from Institut Teknologi Bandung and Astri Akusina from Universitas Gadjah Mada. If you are interested to join our debate competition, you can register. You can do the registration from the link that has been given on the poster. And if you have any more information, you can go to our Instagram at ets_sanata sadar, or you can contact Natasha Mariana. And thank you all for joining, and I hope that everybody will enjoy our beginners class. And we will see you later on Sanata Dharma Debate Open. Thank you all.